Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Security Best Practices for the Modern Digital Workspace. Today's webinar is sponsored by Nutanix and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's event. We've got a really cool event lined up for you here today. Before we jump into it, we've got a little bit of housekeeping here to cover. So first thing is, we want this to be a really educational event. We've heard a lot from our audience that what they appreciate most is learning, of course. Not a sales pitch, but learning about technology and getting all of their questions answered. And so that's what we aim to do here on this event. The format for today's event is a question and answer event. So use the questions box there in your GoToWebinar control panel. Ask us all the security questions you have about desktop as a service, and I have an expert here, which I'll introduce in just a moment, to answer all of your questions. So, keep those questions coming in. We've also taken some questions from our audience on the registration form, and we'll be answering those questions as well during the event. So make sure you use that GoToWebinar control panel there and ask your questions. We also have a question for you, which I'll be popping up in a minute. It's a poll question to get your feedback about desktop as a service. Why or why not have you started adopting desktop as a service? Now, I also want to mention that we will be giving out one Tango gift card in the value of $300 to one lucky attendee on the live event at the end of today's Q&A session at the end of the event. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. But without further ado, I want to introduce today's presenter. That is Mr. Dave Reber, Director of Cybersecurity at Nutanix Frame. Dave, thanks for being on.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here to talk through this today with you.
Excellent. Excellent. I know you have a little bit more bio here coming up in just a minute, so I won't spoil that. But before we introduce you, I want to pop up that poll question and get some feedback here from the audience. So the poll question should be on your screen. It says, what are the reasons you haven't adopted desktop as a service yet? And the answers there are security concerns, cost concerns, performance concerns, or lack of just general knowledge. Maybe you haven't really had time to explore desktop as a service, what it can do for you and how it works. So put your answer in there, and I will be sharing the results with you here in just a moment. And we'll get Dave's thoughts on this. I'm curious to find out what the answer is. Notice this is not a multi-select question, sorry. So you have to choose just one, and that might skew the results a little bit. So let's see what the audience comes up with. All right, looks like most everyone out there has voted. We've got some good feedback here. Let me share the results with you, Dave. And so 17% said security concerns, 20% said cost, 32% said performance, and 31% said just general lack of knowledge on how it works and what it does and why they should use it. I'm sure by the end of today's event, the security concerns will be zero, right, Dave?
That is our objective, and maybe kind of share some of that lack of knowledge, fill some of those gaps for some of those that are listening in today.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and we've been doing a series of desktop as a service webinars with Nutanix and the Frame group at Nutanix. And so we have some other content over at advanced.actualtechmedia.com, and I know they have a lot of content over at nutanix.com/frame to maybe address some of these other topics here, cost and performance and lack of general knowledge. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and introduce you, Dave. Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, so just excited to be here to talk through this. A little bit of my background. I spent 10 years as a senior federal government staff officer focused on cybersecurity, penetration testing, and cyber operations. I joined Frame a little over 2 years ago now, where I joined us as our director of security and also overseeing our public sector solutions and engineering efforts for how we deliver desktop as a service into the U.S. public sector. Became part of the Nutanix family back in this August, and we just continue to kind of grow on how we can offer desktop as a service for everywhere from your little organizations all the way to your enterprise scale capabilities in a secure, repeatable, and easy one-click fashion.
Very nice. Very nice. And I know you've got your LinkedIn info up there. I just followed you on LinkedIn. Hopefully everybody else will do the same to learn about the latest and greatest in desktop as a service security. But what's going on with the VDI market?
So VDI has been a rapidly evolving landscape. I mean, it's traditional from your on-prem, standing up your data centers, but with the rapid adoption of cloud technologies and the ability to kind of pay-as-you-go infrastructure, this is where Frame has come into the fold to be able to deliver your desktops as a service and take advantage of that hyperscale cloud technology. What we've kind of seen is desktops as a service start to really take off because you don't want to have to provision a giant data center and only use 10, 20, 30% of the capacity. The other thing we're finding in many cases is most large organizations have a multi-cloud strategy, whether they so choose to or not. Whether it's just their developers, one group has picked Azure, one group's picked AWS, one group picked GCP, or they purposely want to take it at best of breed of those technologies, and they have the need to be able to scale across those clouds with desktops and service offerings. And I know when we looked at the polls before, that actually kind of aligns to what we see with a lot of our customers. The first thing they always talk about is performance. Can I truly get performance-based applications to run in the cloud and stream to my desktop like it's running natively? From there, the cloud is a cost concern to many organizations. And then when they finally go to look to deploy, that's where the security hurdles come in. And people always like to say security is a roadblocker. I like to say we're yes, but let's do it this way to make sure that we help enable the mission just securely so we can keep doing that mission over the length of time. Now, I want to give kind of a quick primer on Frame. I brought 2 quick slides just to do it to kind of level set the audience if they are or familiar with it or not. So Frame was brought up to figure out how do we simplify that VDI backend? How can we deliver it as a service so you can focus on your users, your applications, and enabling them access to the data securely? How can we do it at a velocity that is in tune with our DevOps pipelines that we've become used to in cloud services, and really normalize that experience across all of our devices, no matter if it's from mobile to Mac to Windows. Now, we look at the next slide. It focuses on kind of what are the layers that we need to look at when we're delivering Frame as a service. So at the top is where your user layer resides. It's where the users log in. It's the applications that they want to leverage. That's what we want you to focus on. But what's amazing when you start looking at desktop as a service is how do we take advantage of all the other service offerings out there? What we do is allow you to plug into any cloud storage or identity and access management solution out there via SAML2 and OAuth. So leveraging your Dropbox, your Google Drive, your Box integrations that your enterprise already has consumed, combined with whether you deploy Okta or Azure Active Directory, just plug and play into those so you don't have to do it again in yet another service offering. But then let's take advantage of the hyperscale cloud technologies that have been delivered and that these big cloud providers have made huge and tremendous investments in. How can you deploy workloads to manage those performance concerns that everyone kind of mentioned, be able to take advantage of every AWS and Azure region globally, with also Xi Cloud services and GCP support coming in the future as well. But the real differentiator of where desktop as a service really has started to kick off is getting rid of the legacy clients. Rather than you need to run Windows with this specific client and version for VDI to work, we really have gone browser first. And this is where a lot of the desktop as a service platforms are going, is how can we leverage your browser, which is pretty much on any endpoint device that you have today for your consumers and your end users, to allow them to kind of get access to the best in technologies and get access to their applications. That's really kind of the one-on-one when it comes to what Frame delivers, but more importantly, just the digital workspace and desktop as a service.
Very nice. Nice overview. It's interesting to see how this all, layers and works together. So, we polled our audience and we've got a lot of questions for you, Dave. You ready to start some Q&A?
Sure thing.
All right. So first question here on the screen is, by moving my desktops to the cloud, aren't I losing control of security?
So I brought a slide to kind of look at that. So in the modern enterprise today, traditional security models are changing. And in order for us to protect our corporations, our data, we really need to start thinking about technologies differently. And not only does this apply to desktop as a service, but just cloud technology in general. I don't know about you, but when I look at our enterprise here, my network perimeter is all over the place. Right? I have mobile laptops, I have mobile devices, they're going everywhere. So how do I get control of my data and where it's flowing? Rapid automation has increased agility for our DevOps and the ability to stand up services. But at the same time, how do we have security keep up with that? And then as directly to your question is, I'm used to on-prem, I'm used to my firewalls, but now they're up in the cloud. What do I do? So we at Nutanix, what we really focus on is giving customers choice. What we want to do is give you transparency when you pick what you want to use. So today with desktop as a service, specifically with Frame, we enable customers to focus on bring your own accounts. So you can get full visibility into AWS or Azure and layer over your existing monitoring tools that you're used to doing to monitor your cloud infrastructure, your cloud spend, however you want to plug into that, to kind of look at addressing these challenges. So looking at your question, yes, you have additional security risks and concerns you got to think about from a cloud perspective, but you also have the tooling capable of locking down monitoring in a way that would traditionally take longer in some cases on-prem. But you have to deal with that whether you're in Frame with desktop as a service or you're in any cloud infrastructure that you're looking to expand to take advantage of.
Okay, very nice. And I see some questions are coming in here. Dave, you want to take all these questions at the end and we'll make sure we save time for these, or you want to answer some of these now?
So I'm just kind of looking through here real quick. And I think we could address a couple now while they're top of people's minds. So kind of the one question here is, well, what kind of latency impact happens in a DaaS environment via the cloud? What we traditionally see with that is all depends on your on-prem network or where your end users are coming from and the network routes. A lot of times, so some enterprises route all their traffic out of one point of presence within a given country or wherever. That can increase latency depending where your end users are. So we see some impacts with VPNs going across that latency. Now, with Frame, we've specifically built our protocol to tolerate high latency numbers. Specifically, we do demonstrations, and we have customers that are running, say, from Australia into AWS's US East data center, which is in Ashburn, Virginia. 500 milliseconds round trip. They're still able to stream up to 30 frames per second across that. Now, there is about a 500 millisecond round trip of latency. I can't beat the speed of light, but we've built quality of service into that. And that's one of the measures you really have to look at for when selecting a DaaS solution. And we always like to say proof is in the pudding. And one of the things you'll see kind of at the end of the slides is a test drive that you can test latency from your different sites.
Okay.
And then there's another question here. The real feel of desktop is to use Windows Explorer and use local C and D drives. Moving to the cloud, how do we maintain the same user experience? So we get that question a lot with traditional enterprises, a little bit less from some bleeding edge adopters that we've kind of had. One of the things that makes it the adopters that are kind of used to it and they don't see an impact are those that are using cloud storage today. So are you used to using Dropbox, Box, and Google Drive? If so, you're used to the workflow of how it's mounted on all of your devices individually and everything's in sync. So what we do with our native integrations is we mount everything as a file store inside the remote operating system. Today, the web browsers don't allow direct access to your local C and D drives. It's for security reasons. You don't want a web browser being able to read all of your files and all of your folders. We are working on additional technologies and other clients to be able to offer kind of that service. But in many cases, what we're actually hearing from our customers is to purposefully block that so that you can prevent the spread of malware malicious files, executables, and enforce them through their cloud storage drive so they can do anti-malware scanning, access control lists, and everything that they want to do to control their data while offering a desktop as a service platform.
Very nice. So this all happens inside the web browser. There's no client that has to be installed locally?
That is correct. So today, everything is web browser based. We are working on native clients, specifically around thin client capabilities, and also to do features such as dual monitors and other experiences that you just can't do in a browser. And that's similar to other options that are out there in the market from a desktop as a service, where the browser is limited from security perspective and a few other feature sets. And to fill those voids, we'll have native clients, but we still want to be browser first.
Okay, and that allows you to really access your desktop from any device. I mean, desktop, laptop, mobile device, kiosk, whatever it might be, thin client device.
Yes. Yes.
Very nice. Okay. Well, let's move on with another question here. The next question is, how can you help me ensure compliance in the multi-cloud world? And you might also want to take this question that came in here from Rendell. He's asking about, his company is in a highly regulated environment with sensitive data. How can we limit our exposure and cloud footprint to help secure client data and meet compliance? Kind of along the same lines as the question on the screen.
Yep. So I did bring, I think, 1 or 2 slides with me as well, kind of looking directly at this question. So there's 2 aspects of compliance that are governing services on the internet from what we've seen. One is your traditional compliance from a security and a hygiene and lockdown perspective. The second is data locality requirements, specifically looking at GDPR and then other types of regulations that are modeled similarly to the way GDPR is governed. So I'll tackle the first one. As I mentioned before, we want to give you the freedom of choice and focus on transparency. That's how we help you with compliance. So if you already have looked to migrate to the cloud, you probably already have some sort of automation, reporting, visibility into your cloud infrastructure. By bringing your own account, whether it be Azure, whether it be AWS, you can layer over those same tools to look at what your ports, your protocols, where your data is flowing, what's your instance types, all of those and configurations on that. We give you so you can use your existing tools. The second thing is, one of the things we are firm believers in the way we run our infrastructure and also want to help our customers with is everything is code. It's kind of a mantra of infrastructure is code. How do I put everything as code so that it's always repeatable every single time and repeatable across clouds? So you can have the trust when you create an account on Frame, whether it's your Azure accounts, your Amazon accounts, we're going to provision it the same way every time based upon the settings that you put in through our web interface every single time. And then you can double check our math by monitoring your cloud infrastructure there. The other thing we start looking at that kind of branches both from security but also into that data locality conversation gets into cloud storage. At the end of the day, it's about the protection of your data. This is why we want to enable you to integrate and take advantage of the controls you already have in OneDrive, Box, Google Drive, Dropbox. If you already have data controls, data governance controls, we tie directly into that and adhere to those controls so that you don't have to just re-engineer. That's how we start tying in. Now, if you don't have those integrations with cloud storage today and you have your own on-prem, we offer other ways through third parties that you can use their software to access and protect your data. Now, getting after the data locality, I mentioned before, we allow you to operate in any AWS or Azure region worldwide today. We also have an early access, the ability to run workloads on Nutanix clusters on-prem from our cloud backplane. So what you're doing is you're trusting us and our auditors, which we'll get into in a couple questions from now about our certifications, that our backplane is secure, it's locked down, and we operate in a consistent manner. And then you choose the region that you want your processing to occur and your data to reside. The only thing that's shared with our backplane is basic telemetry information and those configuration data points that we need to help you orchestrate and automate your infrastructure. So that's where, when you start talking about, you have highly regulated sensitive data. We work with multiple customers in both regulated industries, the federal government, and also governments around the world, to be able to harden and lock down their deployments so their existing controls can own the majority of the protection of those workloads, and they can deploy in those different scenarios.
Very nice. So, I mean, you mentioned federal government and highly sensitive data, and that really brings us to the next question here. So it says, what do you support, or what do you do to support various compliance standards, including sensitive workloads for the federal government? Do you want to talk a little bit about how this works, the different Z cloud deployment scenarios?
Absolutely. So when we were looking at Frame, I'll take you back 2 years ago. One of the reasons we stood up our public sector office at Frame was we were an In-Q-Tel investment portfolio company, where we worked with the U.S. government in order to create a work program and take on investment through In-Q-Tel to be able to offer services to the federal the government, and making sure that we enhanced it in both feature function and security paradigms to meet those sensitive regulated workloads. Over our 2-year journey, this is where we've landed from our ability to support sensitive workloads, specifically targeted at the U.S. public sector, but it also applies to government contractors, and then we can do other service offerings for other regions of the world. So starting with commercial, we have a SOC 2 Type 2 evaluation that we offer our customers under NDA, can see our report, and can work with us on those. We also fall under the Nutanix's ISO information security management systems for ISO 27001, 17, and 18. And we support all of our AWS and Azure regions out of there today. A little over a year ago, we stood up our GovCloud region. So it's an ITAR compliant, US persons only managed isolated region running within AWS GovCloud that supports both AWS and Azure GovClouds today in all of those regions that are there. And we are pursuing FedRAMP moderate certification. We're already listed as FedRAMP ready, and we'll be bringing in auditors later this year to go after that full certification. Now, from both of these platforms over the next short time period, we're going to continue to enhance our ability to support hybrid cloud. So with that, we can run workloads on AHV clusters on-prem. So whether that's for security reasons, data gravity reasons, or just the fact that there's not a region close to you of the public clouds, you'll be able to, from one management backplane run by Nutanix, excuse me, you'll be able to orchestrate those workloads from either cloud based upon your compliance requirements. And lastly, we do have the ability to install managed regions for government organizations or in disconnected, dedicated platform as a service is managed by Nutanix to support air-gap deployments as well.
Wow, very nice, very impressive. Some serious security behind this. So let's move on, because another question here just came in, and it's along the same lines as the question on the screen here. How do you control security and access permissions across the clouds? And the question that came in here, they're asking, how do you grant or give granular permissions for different IT groups? That's the question from Chris. What do you think, Dave?
Oh, it's been a little over a year in the making. We set on a journey to kind of refactor a lot of the things that we've done to make it even better and suited for highly regulated, but also highly controlled enterprise complex environments. So what we've done on our latest generation platform that's been live for several months now, we created an entire new role-based access control system. I believe I brought a slide with this one as well. And what this role-based access control system allows you to do, it's actually not the right one. So we allow you to do is focus on creating a set of rights based and integrate that with your existing directory services. So whether that's Active Directory, Ping Federate, Okta, any SAML2 connection, you can pass in groups and a set of attributes. From there, on the Frame side, you can use those attributes to focus on providing access at different layers within your customer account inside Frame. So that entire role-based access model allows you to set permissions such as whether you're an administrator or not, which accounts you have administrator rights, or you're just a generic user. And we're going to continue to refine that over time. So that kind of gives you the ability to leverage your existing directory services, but at the same time, provide granular access so a subset of IT admins can only access those accounts in those regions. And then users can access one account or the other. And you can do that for cost control, security controls, whatever that you want. All of that is based upon SAML and our roles and permissioning model that's built inside the Frame platform.
Okay.
And this diagram kind of also highlights the ability that all of these points you can kind of control through that model. You can control who gets access to which storage providers, who comes in with what directory services, which clouds people get access to. All of that is configurable within our administrative interface to manage those integrations based upon your existing directory services or leveraging our services that we make available.
Okay, and I think this diagram is actually really nice for those folks in the poll question who said, you know, they're still just trying to get a general understanding of desktop as a service and how it works. So this really highlights for me here that, I mean, you have multiple choices. You can pick your own compute, AWS, Azure, or the on-prem version with Nutanix. I think you said is currently in beta. Is that right?
Yeah, it's in early access right now. Correct.
Early access. You can bring your own applications over there on the left. Then you can select your own storage, networking, identity services, and then all the different devices. You can access it from any location. So just tremendous flexibility in this. Being a former IT manager myself who implemented thin client computing back then with a terminal services farm, you know, you had to do a lot of work to create any sort of flexibility and integrations and things. So really good diagram here that explains how the Frame solution works. Let's see, let's move on to another question here. That is, what level of transparency and visibility do I get, and who has access to my data?
So this is where we get into, I kind of go back to that bring your own account model, and why we focus on that transparency is being able to enable you to have visibility into everything that's going on behind the scenes. What we've also implemented within our system is the ability for you to control even our ability to access your accounts and provide both support in different kind of models. So if you're a highly regulated and highly sensitive or concerned organization, what you could actually do is disable our support administrators from access. At that time, in order for us to provide support, we have to hop on a WebEx or a Zoom and share screens and work with you. But that just helps give you that confidence that we can't get in, do anything to your accounts, and can still provide you support, just in a different way. But if you want us to provide our SEs to provide remote support for you, you can enable them by name for that level of access and transparency. I know there was another question that kind of popped in here that's related from Randall, is like, do you log all changes made to the environment to audit admin changes? We have a feature now within our platform that you can see all changes happening in the administrator views for whoever's making those capacity changes. We want to give you that transparency within those accounts. So you are able to see that within our dashboards and administrative interfaces on who has access. Now, the beauty of that previous picture that shows how we just integrate with existing other services is if you bring your own Google Drive or Dropbox, wherever that data resides, we don't have any access to that. That's just where we provide the integration points, and you still control that access separately from Frame. So you're not providing us access because individual users bring their own tokens to authenticate to those different services. We also you can put additional controls in through networking. If you want to restrict access, that you have to be from the corporate network, or IP filtering and restrictions for who can access the workloads. We support all of those different deployment models. The phrase I always used to say in the government depends on your variable level of paranoia on what level of security controls you want to try to put in play, depending on the threats you need to mitigate against.
Okay. And that brings up a question to me here on this diagram where it says you can pick your own infrastructure, AWS or Azure. Are those my AWS or Azure accounts, or does this run under the Frame AWS account and then I'm billed back for that?
We offer both models. So if you're talking from a security perspective, as the security guy, I always recommend bring your own because you get more visibility. If you just want to pay for pass-through infrastructure credits, we do dedicate a VNet in Azure or VPC per account in AWS. So there is isolation between tenants, but it is a multi-use account at that time. But we can't provide you that visibility because we need to protect the privacy of our other customers that are leveraging that multi-tenant account. So that just depends on what you want to do as a customer.
Okay. And can you give us some examples of, over on the right, the network portion there? Are there network security devices? Maybe, I'm already a Checkpoint or Juniper customer. Are there security solutions from these companies that run in the cloud, or how does that work exactly?
So we offer, so many customers with desktop as a service leverage and cloud infrastructure, they need to get back to on-prem. So this is where we leverage integrating with these partners to be able to offer VPN solutions that go from your cloud-hosted infrastructure back to on-prem. We are actively working on a few other networking options that even allow you to put your workloads behind the protections of these capabilities, just depending on, like I said before, that level of security and threat detection that you need to be able to provide to protect these desktops.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's move on to some more questions here, a series of questions. First one is it secure out of the box? I mean, I don't know how many solutions there are out there that, you buy the solution and then here's the 100-page best practices security guide to secure that solution. And, that leads people to the question, well, like, why wasn't it secured to begin with? Or do I have to why do I have to turn on all these security features? So let's take that question to Frame. I mean, is it secure out of the box, or are there security best practices that I need to add? And I'm not saying that, security best practices are always a bad thing, but what level of security is turned on by default?
So by default, what we focus on is leveraging cloud infrastructure security best practices. So minimal ports, making sure we're leveraging such as AWS security groups. How do we do multi-AZ for availability protections? How do we isolate tenants, both that's between your own accounts, but also between customers? And how do we make sure that your workloads are encrypted at rest? Those capabilities come with our standard orchestration and deployment. Excuse me. From there, your options are kind of focused more towards data flow controls. Do you want to allow your users to copy, paste, file transfer, use Google Drive, use Dropbox? Those kind of settings are capability dependent and your risk profile dependent. I can't turn them off or turn them on specifically for you because it's hard to predict. Right? We want to focus on enabling customers to get access quickly, but also be secure while they're doing it. That's why we focus on security at the cloud layer and then allow you to control the user feature functions that you want to enable or disable. Now, this chart focuses on how we help organizations simplify risk management. So one of the things I haven't touched on yet is ephemeral instances. By default, out of the box, all of our workloads within Frame are ephemeral. So while the user's in session, they can make any changes they want. They can get a virus, they can download malware, they can get owned on their instance. But as soon as their session ends, that instance goes back to gold master state. And what's also interesting is even if that gold master gets compromised, we give you the capabilities to keep incremental backups and then one-click redeployment. So if you ran into an issue or you're seeing your pool of ephemeral instances be compromised for some reason, more than likely that gold master got compromised during your deployment or when you were installing software, you can restore from backup, and from one click, we'll republish and refresh all of your instances so that this way you can eradicate those incidents and really help automate that incident response capability within your organization.
Okay, so is an ephemeral instance the same as a non-persistent
Correct.
Desktop?
Yes,
Got
yes, same thing.
Okay. And I see encryption on here. Where is the data encrypted at rest as well as in transit?
Correct. So we leverage the cloud providers' at-rest encryption capabilities to protect your instances and your data. Our entire backplane and our entire databases are encrypted. You can validate that through our SOC 2 reports that we have an independent auditor attest that we're doing that. We also use TLS, at least 1.2 and above everywhere. And also we leverage the FIPS algorithms that are certified to be able to offer encryption in transit across our infrastructures. We start with FIPS and capabilities in GovCloud, and then we also port those same security configurations. We look to port to our commercial instances so we can both set of customers can take advantage of all of that security and crypto goodness and research that we put into play.
Right. Nice. Okay. And I like the tenant isolation here as well, because obviously this is a shared model of some kind. I mean, I guess just like any AWS or Azure instance, it's shared but isolated. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so every customer gets its own virtual network. So in Azure, that's a VNet. In AWS, that's a VPC. So you have at least that level of isolation between tenants. We purposely use separate instances. So like a pooled VDI kind of conversation for all customers coming in, because this way we found with a lot of customers is since we can dynamically scale up and scale down the cloud and take advantage of pay-as-you-go infrastructure, we can spin up an instance, dedicate that instance to that session, and then spin that instance down. So that balances cost, but also buys you security. So even if that user session is compromised, there's no other user session running on that individual instance. And we have security groups configured so that you can't have inter-instance communication within that virtual network.
Okay, very nice. Very nice. Let's move on to some more questions here. So what about HA and disaster recovery?
So we have an interesting use case from a couple of our customers, specifically around DR. So we had an event after some of the hurricanes last year where a customer called us and said, the hurricane's coming. I need to move my geo mapping capabilities to the cloud. So within less than 24 hours, they stood up a Frame account, installed their software, their users physically relocated out of the hurricane's path, and they were operating within Frame. So that provides you a DR scenario from your on-prem capability. Where Frame allows you to do is if you're looking at our hierarchy, the account is synonymous of both a cloud provider and a region. So you could have multiple accounts across multiple clouds. So you could have desktops supported in US East, US West, Azure in Texas, and then maybe something over in Europe. So not only can you take advantage of the high availability within a given region, but also cross regions and cross clouds where you can have those desktops available and a user from one interface is able to log in and say, I want to go to this region or this account. If there's having outages, you can tell them to flip over to the next one, which gives you that high availability capability. But you can also look at it from a DR perspective for backing up your on-prem or other capabilities to get those workloads processing in a different environment.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing for disaster recovery purposes. And then about high availability, if you need more resource, I mean, if you need more, I guess if a region goes down, what's the unexpectedly, besides the hurricane scenario, what's your option there? You just spin up another region or?
Correct. And that's where we have customers that have accounts in multiple regions across the different cloud providers, where they're sitting there. And because we help manage the elasticity of your cloud account, you basically can provision more resources on demand, or you can let our backend logic handle that for you. So as more consumers are logging in the accounts, we'll spin up more and more instances for them to be able to offer that. So you could have your you could view it kind of as like a warm failover you have configured where your primary may be US East, but if for some reason US East is offline, then you can just tell your users, try US West, and then we would dynamically scale that up as load hits the system. And that's also based upon your capacity settings that you configure.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. I mean, so unlike with traditional on-premises VDI, I don't have to, buy another host and buy some licenses, maybe some more high-performance storage to add new desktops. I just let the algorithm here automatically provision new desktops for my users when they're needed.
Correct. And one of the questions that came in from Richard is, how do the pricing models and terms work? As you mentioned, under traditional VDI, you have to buy hosts, you have to buy data center space, you have to deploy it, rack it, have it all available. We focus on either a named user, concurrent user model for that you come in, and then you have to buy your Windows remote desktop licensing, so the RDS CALs, that's just a Microsoft licensing term. You can either bring your own enterprise agreement, or we can handle that for you. And then it's your cloud infrastructure spend. If you use our cloud account, it's a pass-through cost. Or if you bring your own cloud account, whether that be Azure or AWS, you can get the exact pricing and discounts that you may be getting from those cloud service providers, and you pay them direct. So it's not like you have to buy physical infrastructure you have to pay for up front from a CapEx perspective, and it's sitting there not used. With the cloud, you provision the accounts, and you have them sit, and you just pay for the users that have access to the service. Doesn't matter how many regions they have access to.
And that's very nice, because implementing VDI on premises is usually a very large CapEx and a lot of training, a lot of planning, design, everything like that for the performance and compute capacity for those desktops. And I mean, you all just make it easy. Let's see, another question that came in here. What about the bandwidth requirements for remote locations? How do you know how much bandwidth those remote locations will need?
I always jokingly say, we will consume what you give us. So many of it kind of all depends. We have government customers that have done it over sat links. I will tell you that if you don't have decent comms, you're not going to get 60 frames a second 4K video pumping through that stream. So our protocol today has dynamic quality of service. So what we do is we dynamically adjust pixel depth, frame rate, response rate, all of these kind of variables that are within the video stream to give you the best possible experience. We also give the end user the ability to customize those settings on the fly, because not every user is the same. Some users want seamless video. Others care about crystal clear sharpness on their images, on what they're doing. So they can adjust all of those. We can even go into grayscale mode. So it just kind of depends on the performance characteristics of the app you're trying to do. So something that's like Photoshop or Autodesk, you don't necessarily need a high refresh rate on some of those, depending on your application. Some artists would say, yes, you absolutely need high refresh rates. But some of those apps you don't, versus if you're doing video editing, you need high refresh rates. So it just depends on the app that you're using, what you need to do, whether it's Word doc or whatever, based upon the available bandwidth that we need to consume. Also, as an administrator, you can cap it per sessions. So we have some government customers that go across shared like BGAN links, and they have they have like 20 users at the site, and they can't have one user consume all the bandwidth. So what they do is they limit it to like 512 kilobits per second. So that's the max throughput that they can get a usable session, but it works for their use case and what they need to do.
And that 512, is that configurable like per device or per site, or?
It's per what we call a launch pad, which is a set of configurations on an account. So that's another, back to that role-based access control model. You can say these users have access and these settings must be enforced for them.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Let's see. Let's move on here. Should I use persistent or non-persistent desktops, Dave?
Depends on you, what your paranoia risks are. I personally, as a security guy that also helped deploy some large enterprises, I'm a fan of non-persistent. It really helps with your patch management. It helps with your security, helps with numerous things from the actual image itself. But I understand where users need to have access to files, configurations, bookmarks, and everything like that. We have multiple options for profiling now and also coming in the next couple of releases of our platform that will allow you to still have non-persistent VMs, but still have profiles at the same time, where we just copy them straight in as soon as the user loads. And then once the session's over, we copy them back out. Also a feature we call user drives that will allow them to have a dedicated drive or volume in the cloud for themselves, but keeping that instance still ephemeral. It really comes all down to patching and image management. If you don't have persistence, you have to use traditional tools. I'm sorry, if you have persistent desktops, you have to have traditional tools like SCCM for patch management or image management to push updates. It's just it's balancing kind of, you want user capability versus scaling and how you manage those capabilities.
Okay. And I mean, from an end user perspective, of course, the end user, if you ask them, yeah, I mean, you're not going to explain persistent versus non-persistent, but they're always going to say, well, I want my cat picture on my desktop. You know, I mean, is there any kind of middle ground where I can get a stateless desktop that's new, but then, you know, some of my user customizable settings are applied on top of that?
Yeah, and that's the profile solutions that I was mentioning before. We'll allow you to have that non-persistent image, and we copy those profile settings down that are controlled by your administrator. And those controls are basically saying, here's what registry key, files, folders, and everything that need to copy and where, and we push those down to the image to be able to offer that for that user session.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And you mentioned, you know, applications. Can we bring our own custom applications?
Absolutely. So Frame gives you a base image. So today our default is Windows Server 2016. On Azure and on AHV, we'll be adding support for Windows 10, and then we'll also support Linux. One of the big use cases, specifically in enterprise and government, is legacy applications. How do you run an app that requires a very, very old version of Java, but still protect your endpoints? This is where Frame comes into play, allows you to create that image. It's ephemeral, so even if Java gets exploited in the small amount of time the user's using that app, say it happens, it goes right back to gold image state. You can bring any executable that can install on Windows. We have seen very rare cases that an app doesn't work on server, since it's binary compatible with Windows 10. But pretty much every single application works. You just install it, and then you can offer it to your end users.
Nice. And then what about legacy applications that, can you all do anything special around that?
So we can't fix the differences between, say, old DOS and 8-bit apps and Windows 10 and server, but we can support legacy applications that can install and run. So as long as it can run on the server, we can simplify your enterprise desktop deployments by running it in a Frame session versus local on your desktops. And this way you can isolate the blast radius of any vulnerable software. Even if you need it in your enterprise, it can run on an ephemeral instance running in Frame versus deploy to your desktops that are browsing the internet or accessing email, putting you at risk.
I like that, the blast radius. Very cool. All right. You mentioned patching. Whose responsibility is that, and how often is it done?
So what Frame provides is when you get a brand new account, we give you the latest and greatest, for whether it's the Windows or Linux instance that is up to date when you start that account. From there, it's the customer's responsibility to manage that image and keep it up to date. The beauty with Frame, we have multiple customers that have accounts all around the globe with multiple regions, multiple sub customers. They can update one image, clone it out to all the regions, one-click button on those accounts, and it deploys those instances. So rather than having to patch thousands of instances through SCCM or whatever tooling you have, you patch one gold master, and one click, we handle all the publishing and deployment out to your entire fleet.
Very nice. Okay. Let's see. Let's fast forward through a few of these questions because we're running out of time. So this one here, what does Frame do to continue to enhance security and security recommendations to customers?
So There's a couple of things we do. I mean, we have our certifications, but those that live through certifications, it doesn't necessarily mean we're doing the right things. We're just doing the things that they're checking. We're a big believer in dog fooding our own product internally and using that. That's both from a security perspective, but also just an end user to make it better. We also internally run our own hacker convention for our engineers. We call it FrameCon, where we do believe that security is a team sport, and it takes the entire village, everybody within the company, to keep us secure and our customers secure. That's why we take the time to teach them how to hack, teach them how to break our own product, and we let them loose against our own product just to make it better. Because we're a big believer in using the knowledge of the people and individuals that built it to help figure out how we make it more secure and raise awareness across the company. So when customers subscribe to us, you're subscribing to our philosophies of, right, security really is a team sport. The cloud is a shared responsibility model between any provider and the customer. And we take that responsibility seriously for our customers, because that last quote's from Warren Buffett. It truly is. Right? You can take 20 years to build your reputation. In just 5 minutes, it's ruined by some kid sitting in his mom's basement that finds your server and gets in and puts something out on Twitter about you. So that's where we take it seriously. We educate our workforce, and everyone gets to take advantage of those benefits.
Very nice. Very nice. Let's see. We've got a few more questions here still to answer in the time that we have left. But I do want to announce our prize winner for today. That is Robert Price of Ohio. Congratulations, Robert Price of Ohio. And I also want to call out the Nutanix.com/frame test drive. You want to talk about this for just a second, Dave?
Yeah, so what we do is we release Test Drive. It allows anybody to go sign up and get 2 hours free of Frame, so you can try it. I highly encourage everyone, go take a look. You get access to a full account. It has the ability to run CPU instance workloads. So you can install, onboard your apps. There's a base set of applications there. Try it and see how you like it. And then from there, this is a form that you can contact us for more information, or you can even go to my.nutanix.com today and sign up with a credit card and buy a license of a Frame and get your organization started today.
Very nice. I like the free trial. I'll just leave that up there on the screen for anyone who wants to check it out while we answer a few more questions here. So we're moving into the lightning round, Dave. Just a few minutes left. So Bruce is asking, we have a lot of just single SMBs, like small shops. Is it economically viable to try to migrate them to Frame? And I know that economically viable is a very, kind of subjective term there. But what's your take on small companies using Frame?
So it kind of depends on what you're looking to be able to accomplish. We have some large organizations that kind of like treat themselves as a bunch of small 10-person shops. And what they do is that each of those individual shops subscribe to Frame to use it for their own purposes. What it allows you to do is give kind of master account visibility, but allows them to kind of go do their own things. We see some small organizations subscribe to Frame because they don't want to buy big GPUs for accessing stuff like AutoCAD and Autodesk. They also want to do like shared computer licenses for that kind of software, so it can decrease your costs in those ways. And I would even say for small organizations, buying a VDI farm just seems out of the realm of possibility in some cases. This is a good way to pay as you go.
Very nice. And then to clarify here for Richard, this is a BYOD solution. I mean, you could use a Mac, you can use an iPad to access your Frame desktop. Is that right?
Yeah, any device that has a browser, it can use. So by default, it is a BYOD solution.
Okay, nice. And then Kenneth is asking what level of disk encryption is supported?
So on AWS, we use EBS volume encryption with KDS keys within you, especially if it's in your account, it would use your CMK, your customer master key on your account. On Azure, it's encrypted by default. Now, as far as the algorithms, it's up to those cloud providers. We just inherit that.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Well, this has been a really educational event, really educational session. I learned a lot about security around desktop as a service. I hope everyone out there in the audience did as well. Dave, it's been really great having you on the event today.
I thank you for inviting us out here today and enjoyed the conversation. And I look forward to meeting some people on LinkedIn, or if our paths cross, we're here to help.
Awesome. Thank you to Nutanix for sponsoring today's event. Make sure you visit nutanix.com/frame and sign up for the Frame test drive. Give it a try for yourself and see what you can do with desktop as a service, how it might help you and your company. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope that you learned a lot, and I hope that you'll join us on our future upcoming webinars. You can learn more at events.actualtechmedia.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Enjoy.